Hello, ladies. Welcome to Ignite Your Destiny. I am Jamie Marie, and I am here to welcome Angela Herrington. Hello, Angela.
Hello, hello.
I'm so glad you're here and that you were able to do this so last minute.
I love it. A little spontaneity never hurt anybody.
Yes, it's so fun. So tell the ladies a little bit about you.
Yeah, so I am Angela Herrington. I'm a life and digital strategy coach, and I love helping women find freedom and fulfillment in their God-given calling. So whether it's working with them on their business or life coaching or even doing social media for them, I really love helping women step into what God is calling them to do without getting stuck in the overwhelm and the burnout that just happens sometimes when that alignment's not there.
Yes, it does. And so how did you step into that? Like, how did you find what you wanted to do?
So that was really a long and winding road. So just getting started. Oh, if you're listening to this, you're like, I have a calling. I just don't know what it is. And I don't know how I'll figure it out. It's okay. You don't have to have it all figured out today. It was called the ministry about 7 years ago. And I started an online women's ministry. Now, God has a sense of humor because I didn't blog. I barely used social media. I mean, this was 7 years ago. Facebook was still kind of new for everybody outside of like the cool kids. And I didn't even keep a journal. And God said, I want you to write. I'm like, okay. So I started a blog, and I just had this strong sense that I wasn't ever going to be like the traditional brick and mortar pastor. I was going to be like going online. I was going to preach here, right? And so that's really how it started. And I didn't know what I was doing. So I took classes and I found mentors, and I just tried to be a sponge and soak up as much as possible. And through that, I met some really cool people, started to have some success, started to reach lots of people. And they said, hey, show me how to do that. Like, your numbers are getting big on Facebook. How do you do that? And I started working with people on social media. Great. That seemed natural. But then when I got into the trenches with them, I realized there was a lot more going on than not knowing what buttons to push on here.
Yes.
So I went back to school, and I ended up going back and getting a life coaching certification. And I also went back and got my master's from Wesley Seminary to really help with the spiritual growth side. So I show up for my clients in this crazy long and winding road, but I get to show up as a coach, as a pastor, and as an online business person who really understands what it takes to get in front of people on Facebook and to share with them in a way that's not hostile or judgy or mean. Like, it's all about encouragement. It's all about connecting with people where they are. So it's been a really windy road, but I'm pretty happy with where we're at. I feel like me as an individual and us as a team, we're right where God wants us to be, and it's really allowing us to minister to and encourage a whole lot of people.
Oh, I love it. And I love how one step grew into the next, and then it just continued to flourish from there. And I commend you for going back to school too. I mean, I just finished my degree in December, and I always thought, oh, I'm just too old, but
yeah,
it's never too late. It's never too
late
to step into what you're wanting to do and what God's called you to do. So I love that.
Absolutely.
I commend you for that. So
thank you.
That is exciting. So as it was growing, and you were starting to go, okay, I'm starting to feel pulled in this direction. How did you really sort out the steps that you needed to take and find that calling?
Yeah, I think for me, it was very much, the first steps were more like stumbles. It was like,
important to know.
That's important to know, right? Like, if I'm just being totally honest, the biggest steps and the first steps were more of like when you're walking with your toddler and you forget how short their legs are. Yes. And you start taking normal steps, and the next thing you know, you're practically dragging them, right? Like, they're kind of like running behind, trying to not fall. Yeah, that's kind of the start of my ministry.
I love it. And it was never an easy road in the beginning. I mean, you're right.
No, and it's so funny because I was so excited at the beginning. There was definitely some excitement, and it was just kind of like, okay, well, I'm going to figure out how to build a website. Like, I love tech, but I wasn't up on WordPress. I wasn't up on all the, like, I hadn't done any of that. I was actually working as a nurse in an early intervention program at the time. And I'd been a nurse for like 10 years at the time, maybe 15. I don't remember at this point, but a totally different industry.
Yeah.
And it just was like, okay, I've got to take a baby step and then see what happens, and just see what happens. And that's really what it was. I'm thankful that I didn't overthink it, because that happens later, right? Like later when I got into it more and I had a following and I had people depending on me, then that's where I really was at risk of overthinking it. But in the beginning, I was very much just a toddler being dragged along.
But I mean, it's so important to do, and also to just dig in and learn.
Yeah.
It's so important as well. But I love that you brought up the analogy of riding, or when they first start walking, because it is like that. You trip over your feet, or you start walking fast. And that's so important, because I think a lot of times we think it'll be smooth sailing, and I don't say that to discourage anybody, but I say it to be very real and honest and authentic, but also to let the women know that might be stepping out into their purpose, that they're not alone.
Yeah.
And that it's normal. So share with me what, in your eyes, what God's calling is, and how a woman knows if they have one.
Yeah. So this is one of the biggest, really one of the biggest revelations I've had over the last few years, because like I said, sometimes I get out in the weeds and I think about all the stuff I have to do and how big it is. And very early on, God showed me a very big vision. And so I was actually thinking small, and he literally showed me a 7-story building, huge building. And that's intimidating.
Right?
That's intimidating. It's like, okay, I'm still baby stepping it here, and you're showing me these big buildings. So one of the things that really kind of has turned things around for me and opened up a lot of, just a lot of freedom, is understanding that the work that we do, that's not our calling. And everybody's like, whoa, wait a second. Well, I'm called to serve. Yeah, you're absolutely called to serve, but that's not the core of the calling. The core of our calling is to move closer to God. End of story. Like no commas, no checklist, nothing. Like that is literally what we are called to do, is to be in his presence, to move closer to him, to align ourselves with him, just to be in relationship with him. The work that we do is the natural byproduct of that relationship. So if it is, a 100-story building that God is calling you to, he's actually calling you to step close enough to him that stuff happens naturally. It may still take work and it may still be hard, and it doesn't negate that. But I think that kind of definition of calling is crucially important, because if we chase the calling without the one who gave it to us, then the calling actually becomes an idol, and we get resentful and we get burned out and we don't have healthy boundaries, and we have trouble getting up in the morning. Who wants to wake up and carry this big, heavy burden? Well, that's why the alignment is so important. So I would say to anybody who's even playing with it and thinking, okay, what is a calling? Do I have one? It always starts with taking those baby steps towards God. Mm-hmm. And then the rest of it will naturally bloom out of that time that you spend with him.
Yes, that's awesome. And it's such a great way to reframe it. Mm-hmm. I've heard things along the same lines before and heard others speak on that, but just how you reframe that as the core calling and really digging in deeper, mm-hmm. And following that alignment is so true. And I can't even put it into words, really. Like, it'll hit me tonight later, but I'm just like, wow, she completely reframed how most people say that. And it's just an amazing way to do that.
Yeah. The thing that I love about it the most is that if our calling is to move closer to God, then there's absolutely no question about whether or not we're good enough.
Yeah.
Are we smart enough? Are we good enough? Are we, do we dress nicely enough? Are we a good enough speaker to be able to be in front of thousands and thousands of people? That doesn't matter.
Right.
Because that's not the calling. The calling is to stand beside God, to walk with him in whatever it is that's in front of you. And it doesn't matter if we're good enough for that. To be honest, we're not. Like, that's why grace exists. Yeah. So whatever baggage we're showing up with, it's okay. God's already got it covered. And that's where that freedom comes from, because we don't have to wake up every day and prove to God that we're good enough to do this thing that he wants us to do. It just takes that kind of guilt mindset out of there. And I think that there are so many of us who we could do amazing things if we would stop being mad at ourselves, if we would stop carrying the guilt and the baggage and the doubt and just realize God already had that covered before we ever made those mistakes.
Right.
Yeah.
And share with the ladies, because it was such an amazing way that you put it about the negative self-talk and how, would we allow our children.
Yeah.
I want you to share that, because I think it's so important for women across the world to hear.
Yeah, so I'm going to age myself a little bit here, but I grew up with sitcoms. Sitcoms were taking off, and sitcoms used to be, like, all the shows used to be very polished and happy and yes sir, no man. Like, the kid who broke the vase was the one, Dennis the Menace. That was the worst thing he could have done.
Yes.
When I was growing up, they weren't like that anymore, right? Like, we grew up in the era of The Simpsons, Married with Children. Sarcasm was all of a sudden everywhere. And yeah, it's funny, but what happens is we've all absorbed that. And so some of that sarcastic, that comeback, that, just that, it's kind of sharp. It's like sharpened nails a little bit, right? A lot of those negative things have worked their way into our minds and into our hearts, and we use them every day. But what we don't think about is how damaging that is for ourselves. And the kind of the litmus test I use, when I get frustrated or in the weeds or really starting to doubt myself, or if I'm mad because I didn't do as well as I thought I should have, I stop and I say, you know what, would I let anybody say this to my daughter? Would I let those kind of smart alecky, judgmenty things, would I let someone say those to my daughter? Or even worse, would I say them? Because, right, a mama's words have a lot of weight with daughters. Would I say them to my daughter? Could I look her in the eye and say, you know what? That wouldn't have happened if you had just tried harder.
Right.
Oh my gosh, no way. No way would I say those things. Like, I would not be able to live with myself if I said some of those things. And so kind of coming into that season of having a daughter and really thinking about her self-talk. And, I don't want my voice in her head with all those negative words. But why are they in my head? Why is my voice in my head with those negative words? Like, that really became an aha moment. And it's easy to say, but it's much harder to live it out. It's much harder, when I miss a deadline, or when I forget to send, earlier today, I forgot to send something to a client. And I was like, I just forgot. But I mean, literally, there's no excuse. Nothing happened. I just didn't write it down.
Right.
And a year ago, that would have been like guilt and anger and all, but stuff like that happens. And we just have to give ourselves a little bit of grace and not cling to all that negative self-talk and all those icky words, because they do have weight and they do get in the way.
Yes, they do. And I've thought about it since you've shared that with me. I probably have thought that at least 10 times.
Yeah.
Maybe more of, okay, I wouldn't say that to my kiddos, so I'm not going to speak it on my own, to myself. And so I thank you for that. And I wanted to share that with everybody, because it is true.
Mm-hmm.
The things we say to ourselves, oh, you didn't do that fast enough. We wouldn't say it to our kids, at all. And just, from a life strategy, you forgetting to send that, if you're hard on yourself, well, we're going to forget things. And if we put that into our kiddos' hearts and minds, they're always going to be worried about perfectionism. And I think that's so important. It's just such a wonderful way to think about it that I've never thought of. Definitely.
Yeah. There's so much research out there that's showing that our kids are under an unbelievable amount of pressure. And, even kind of the younger edge of the millennial generation into the kids that are in elementary school now, there's this performance anxiety, because these kids are tested to death, right? Like, every year, tested, are they proficient? And there is definitely a need to make sure that kids are being educated. But what's happening is, in a lot of schools, there's so much pressure on the schools to perform that this emotional side of health and education is kind of falling behind. And so it's really important for us to think about the environment that we're raising our kids in, and are we giving them the words to express themselves? And, you know, if you didn't grow up with the words to express yourself, if you didn't grow up in a place where it was safe to express emotion and frustration and all those things, you kind of have to learn it alongside of them. And it's hard. It takes some courage. I mean, there have been times when I've gone to my kids and said, you know what? I shouldn't have said that. I shouldn't have said that. Or, you know, I'm sorry that I didn't pay attention to you this evening because I was really mad about work stuff, but I really should have just walked away and talked to you about spelling. Like, you know, create those dialogues in our relationships with adults and with kids. Sometimes I think it's easier with kids because they're a little more forgiving. So if you didn't grow up in a space where you have that emotional safety, start with kids. Start with the younger kids because they're really good at forgiving, and then just work your way up to adults later.
Yes, definitely. And, you know, that's so important because as we look at ourselves and what our calling is, you know, we can, if we really stay present in what we're feeling, we can really see those things and those words that maybe have been spoken into us, not necessarily on purpose, you know, that make us doubt our calling and what we're made to do. And, you know, so somebody that would be maybe watching and they say, okay, well, how do I know? How do I know what my calling is? What would your advice be to that woman?
Yeah. Well, the first thing is to go back to how we define the calling. You know, your first step is to go to God, because you can do the work. You know, you can impact people positively and still be completely unfulfilled and overwhelmed and burned out. It happens with pastors all the time, right? You know, there's a lot of, sometimes there's a lot of weight on the things that we're called to do and the places we're called to serve. There's just a lot that needs to be done. Sometimes the resources aren't there. So it's really easy to overextend. So first is to go to God and say, hey, what am I doing here? Like, you know, here I am, Lord, right? Like that launches 1,000 ships, right? It's super easy. But then to kind of stay in that space takes a little more practice, and to make sure that it's, I don't know if it's anybody else, but I tend to hear God say something and I'm like, okay, cool, I can do that. Stay here and I'll be right back. No, right? Like, I'm totally capable of this. I'm going to run over here and do this thing. And then I'm going to come back and I'm going to show you how well I did it.
Right.
And that's where we kind of get off track. So that's the first thing, is to go to God. The second thing, which is, it usually becomes apparent when you're spending time with God, is whatever that thing is that feels like it's your heaviest baggage, whatever that thing is that when you hear those doubts, that's what the doubts are speaking about. In coaching, we call it the saboteur. It's kind of the name for the negative voices in your head. It's not you, but sometimes it sounds like you, right? So that thing that nags at you, that thing that makes you feel totally worthless, it's not your calling, but I'm going to tell you it's going to be really, really close to your calling. So in my case, you know, when I first started out, writing and all of that, like, I was cool with that. But the idea of being a pastor, I just had a completely different mindset about what being a pastor was. And it was really only until about, you know, a year and a half ago when I first started stepping into that idea that, no, I actually am a pastor. You know, it wasn't until after I went back and got my master's degree and now I'm like, okay, I'm qualified. But that I really had to sit back and be like, you know what? That fear of not being able to speak what God wants me to speak was running so close to this calling to be a pastor that on a bad day, the saboteur's voice saying, well, you can't do this, was actually louder than God's voice saying, yeah, we're going to do this together.
Wow.
So sometimes that looking and saying, okay, what are the things that trigger me? What shuts me down? Why does that shut me down? It's probably super close to the one thing that's like your superpower. Like, if God planted a gold seed in you that was going to bloom into this amazing calling flower, it's probably really close to that. Yeah. Because why else would evil and darkness want to shut it down?
Right.
If it wasn't capable of serving God in phenomenal ways, why would it matter? Why would they mess with it? Why would they fight it?
so spot on. So spot on, because that's always what happens. I completely agree. You know, and I can see that over and over and over as well. In my own life and with people that I work with as well. I mean, it's just like that voice wants, you know, the enemy wants to take that out so that we are
absolutely
confident in speaking that. So that is so, so true. And it's funny because right now I can do these interviews, you know, no big deal.
Mm-hmm.
And I can go get live in a private group and do a video. No big deal. I go to do a live in a public place and I'm like, uh-oh, what do I do? What do I say? And the funny part about it is I want to do public speaking.
Sure.
So it makes perfect sense, you know, those areas are really trying to keep me.
Absolutely, because if your words are locked behind an email gate or locked behind a group, that limits your circle of influence. Now, that circle of influence, those people are still going to be influenced by what you say. But I would be confident in saying that you're still not fully unleashing what God's given you in those environments. There's something that we hold back when doubt gets really loud.
Yes. Yeah.
Because it gets messy. When God says, oh, you know, not just open the doors a little, but like open the barn doors, right?
Yeah.
Let this message out. It gets messy. And there's snotty tears and there's and there's times where you just like have to stop and blow your nose and go like, or it's a powerful thing and you unleash it and then you have to go lay down for a little while because it just takes so, you know, it takes a lot of energy to sit that close to God sometimes. And we see that as a weakness. We see that as something that we're afraid of, either us breaking down or us, you know, having to have that recovery time, but it's really not. Like, that's the way it's supposed to happen.
Yeah.
That's, you know, that's where the power is. The power is in community. And there's not anything more powerful than authentic communication in a community with God right in the middle of it.
Yeah. And it's so true. I mean, I sat today and I'm like, what is my deal? Like, I'm doing interviews. Why am I, you know? So it was a funny moment to really realize that. So, you know, I encourage women to really look, you know, and say, okay, what, like you said, what things are triggering me and what am I getting fearful about, you know, because those are definite signs of where your purpose is.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's so funny that you brought that up because I'm like, yeah, I just had that talk today with myself.
Yeah. So we'll have some accountability about that.
Yeah. You'll be like, hey, Jamie.
Hey, Jamie, how's that going? Yeah, this
behind closed doors.
Yeah, you didn't realize before you make friends with coaches that accountability is part of the deal.
Yeah, right. I love it. So, okay, share with the ladies, you know, okay, they're ready to step out.
Yeah.
And they want to do it.
Yeah.
How do they do it without getting overwhelmed and without burning out? Because we women.
It's easy. I think that I think culturally it's easier for women to burn out because it's like the super mom is the goal for a lot of us. Like that's the image that's portrayed. So we have jobs, we have this, we have that. And to be honest, there are some women who can do it all. Like that they're in a phase in life where they can say yes to the things that they want to. So outwardly, we look at them and they look like super women. Right. But the key is they've probably said no to some things in their life too. And that's what we don't see. So the first step is to figure out what God's telling you to say yes to and what he's telling you to say no to. And, you know, I want to talk snotty tears. That's not always a one-way conversation. Sometimes there's some two-way back and forth, like, no, we'll go, no. Let's talk about this. Like, I don't want to give that up. That's doing, like, I'm helping people, right? I'll give you an example. For me, one of my biggest weaknesses is volunteering because I love it. I absolutely love it. And last year, our business just exploded. Our social media company just blew up in an amazing way, like 400% growth. And what happened was I had already said yes to some volunteering opportunities. And so about 2/3 of the way through the year, I didn't have that bandwidth anymore. And it was like, okay, but I'm helping people. I'm doing good. But what I had to really boil it down to, and some of them were even faith organizations I was doing volunteering with, but what I had to really boil it down to was, is it my calling or not? Because you can't do it all. You have to say no to some things. So I think every conversation with God about calling starts with, what do you want me to say yes to, and what do you want me to say no to? And you may have to say some no's before there's any space to say yes.
Yes, that's so true.
And it's hard.
Sometimes that space doesn't look like what you want it to look like either.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Our pastor talks about the margins, not like marginalized people, but like margins in our life. And he says that's where the miracles happen. But if we don't leave those margins, if we don't leave space, when do we just create, we have to just have this space where we're open. Because there are miracles happening all the time. Don't kid yourself. I mean, there are big miracles that happen, but there are also small, little, quiet miracles.
Yes.
And if life is packed 24/7, if we can't wake up without 3 cups of coffee, and we can't go to sleep without having a beer or a glass of wine or antihistamine or whatever your choice is, if we can't slow our brains down enough to rest, then it's going to be really hard to be awake during the day and have those moments where God can just kind of slip things in. Or, our family can pour into us. Like, I have to say no to things that are good so that my family can have some of me. Because when I'm with my kids, they minister to me in ways that nobody else in the world will ever be able to. Yeah. Just because of that relationship that we have. Yeah. So yeah, the yes, no is a really hard thing, but that's where I would always start.
Yeah, and I agree, because we have to make that space, and sometimes that space might be for our kiddos or our family, like you're saying,
Yeah.
And I know for women, it's so hard because of how the pressures that society's put on us to say no.
Yeah.
So important. And I've learned, I'm sure you agree, that when we're able to say no and not have guilt from saying no, it is so freeing.
Yeah.
I've never said no until the last few years, and it has been immensely helpful.
Yeah. I really feel like Gen Xers, and even some of the late baby boomers, like, we were the first group of women that were told that we could do anything. But I think what we which is amazing, like, we absolutely deserve equal rights in all ways. But what happened is it kind of got twisted to be, okay, but to be a good woman, you have to do it all.
Yes.
But that's not the truth, If you're in a season where you want to stay home with your kiddos, do it. Don't let anybody guilt you out of that. If you're in a season where you want to work and take your kids to daycare, do it. Don't let anybody guilt you out of it, right? Like, that's where it gets twisted. So it's not the access to everything that's the problem. It's feeling like my life is worth less if I don't choose all of those things. That's the saboteur. Yeah. That's where that negative thing comes in.
Yeah, and because being at home with your kids is a perfect destiny at that moment in time in your life.
Absolutely.
And our lives change and they evolve and they grow.
Yeah.
And so, for any of the moms that are listening that are stay-at-home moms, that's perfectly okay.
Yeah.
God has you in that season right now. And then there may be other stay-at-home moms that are like, okay, but I want to do more. And that's okay.
Yeah.
So I think that's important, because I know we do have that pressure from society.
Absolutely. I was a young mom. Yeah, I was a very young mom. And I have to say, having my oldest couple kids in daycare was really cool, because I had them in a home daycare. And that woman was a kind of a mentor for me. And she would very gently nudge and say this or say that. And so, looking back in hindsight, there was so much growing up that I needed to do, that having them in a place where we could both get a little bit of mentoring was fantastic. And so I feel like they, having them in that environment was the best decision at the time. Now with my older kids, I'm a little older. I hope I'm a little wiser. I was able to step into kind of the ministry thing full time. And so the last year that my daughter was home full time before she went to school, I was actually able to be home with her. And that was a huge gift because there's like 15 years age difference between my kids. Huge difference. So it was neat to be able to do that and to be confident and to be able to do it in that season and not feel guilt either way. It's very cool.
Yeah, because God wants our homes blessed and peaceful.
Absolutely.
But we have to be in the flow of what we're supposed to be doing as well, you know.
Right.
That discontent comes in when we're not in alignment. So
absolutely.
So yeah, man, I could go off on like 10 different questions after that.
I know. We went deep fast.
Yeah, we got real deep. So when you first started out, you know, maybe you didn't feel that you had the time, or you didn't feel that you had the money to step out and do these things. What would you say to that woman?
I think the key with that is to recognize that you don't have to go from 0 to 60 today. Mm-hmm. Right. So, you know, in the vision that God's given me, he's giving me this vision of this massive building, but it didn't start, like, I don't have it yet. Like, that's not what we have yet. You know, a lot of times people will come to my Facebook page and they'll be like, oh my gosh, you have 65,000 fans. Or they'll go into the Christian Women Who Lead group and they're like, oh my gosh, there's 3,800 women in here. Well, I didn't start it yesterday.
Right. Yes, that's important.
Yeah. And I didn't, you know, I think on the ministry website, we've got like 420 blog posts. Okay, but that's been going for 6 years. So, and I have half a dozen ladies who blog for me, like they contribute. Okay, so A, it doesn't have to all be done in one day, and B, you don't have to do it by yourself. So one of the tools that we use in coaching is to kind of categorize things. I use this in my courses, to categorize things by what are right now things, what are soon things, eventually things. And then I even usually do like a never, because sometimes I have things I'm like, I don't think that's ever going to pan out. And a parking lot. One of the best things I learned in coaching school was parking lot. So I put that in all of my activities. So if you have 100 things, you're like, God's calling me to write a book and to speak and to build a church and to do, okay, well, he's probably not calling you to do all of it today. I could be wrong, but 99.9% of the time, he's not calling you to do it all today. So what's the right now stuff? Mm-hmm. What's the stuff that's coming in the next 3 to 6 months? What's the stuff in the next couple of years? And then to really kind of just look at how it all plays together and do what you can with the resources you have right now without feeling guilty about the stuff you didn't get to.
Yes.
You know, it sometimes... Yeah, we have to work. This is an evening. You know, there are times where we have to work in the evenings. There are times where I travel, and so I'm gone for a few days. There are times that I miss things, but I'm still able to say, because of this balance, family is a priority. Mm-hmm. And so I'm able to have those conversations with my kids and be like, hey, I can't come to the spelling bee, but I have this other thing on my calendar. Or, you know, when it comes to, you know, muffins for mom. Okay, well, I'll be there for muffins for mom, but I won't be able to volunteer for donuts for dad. Or, you know, just finding that balance and that rhythm that works for you. If you're a stay-at-home mama and you've got a couple of kids and they're toddlers, it's okay if you only get a couple of hours a week work in. Like, it's kind of a miracle.
Yes.
Right? Do it in a way that nurtures you and feeds you rather than makes you feel bad. You don't want to do it in a way that makes you feel bad because you didn't get to the stuff. I have a friend who just adopted, and it's like your life changes when you bring kids into your household. So how do you prepare for that? You know, things change. Your grocery list changes. Your laundry loads change, you know, right? Like all of these things change. Well, your natural flow of your day is going to change too. So leave room for those things to happen. Yeah. Leave that margin in there so that if God wants to use you in a new way, there's space for that without it being something that just like pushes you over the overwhelm cliff.
And it's so, like, you don't even know this. It's so funny that you said that. I had a retail photography studio, and it was extremely successful. You know, the calendar was full and the money was great, you know, and we got the call about our daughters that we were going to adopt. And at the time they were just foster children. We didn't know we'd be adopting, but I really truly felt that in my heart. Okay, this is a season that I need to put the business to the side.
Yeah.
And clear that space, because life is going to change immensely. You know, it was a very humbling moment, you know, because that pride was like, man, I just built this business. And
yeah.
you know, now I'm going to set it down. But I knew that I would be able to come back to that if that was what was meant to happen.
Absolutely.
And, you know, and I firmly believe that God had that there for a reason. And it's also become a stepping stone and part of the story, you know, of who I am and who God has me to be. So you know, it's funny that you said that, because I'm like, yep, that's exactly what happened in my world. The adoptions rocked my world.
Yeah. Yeah. And being called to something, a lot of times it is like having a baby, because you kind of have a vision, you know, whether it's a birth baby or an adopted baby, you have a vision of how it's going to go. And for most of us, that's not exactly how it goes. And it still turns out wonderful. It still turns out amazing. But you get stretch marks. Let's just put it that way.
Yeah.
You know, you have to buy bigger jeans, or you just, you know, you need a little more wrinkle cream and a little more coffee. Like, it changes you. And I think that sometimes we go into our calling with the sense that all the work is done. And so now we're fully equipped to do whatever it is. And again, going back to the definition, the calling is actually to stand close enough to God that we start to look like him. And that you know, that the goodness and the grace spill out from us even when we're not trying. You know, that's the goal. That doesn't usually happen on day one. That takes some time. You know, if you go back and you look at the Bible and you look at the disciples, they were walking with Jesus and they didn't always get it right. So we should be able to sit back and say, you know, it's okay that I didn't get that all right yesterday. Like, there's transformation, there's refining, there's all these words that talk about us being changed by the relationship with God. And we just have to be okay with showing up with whatever we've got today.
Yes. Yeah. And over and over, I say to people, you know, give yourself grace.
Yeah.
Give yourself grace. You know, it doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to be, you know, I don't know. It just doesn't have to be perfect. Give yourself grace and it's going to happen.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Timing, you know, timing for God is always spot on. You know,
absolutely.
You're listening and following that leading. So
I know, we've been all over the place.
I love it. Man, my head is spinning. Like, if you saw my just over here right now, you'd be like,
pray for my husband. I mean, that's what he lives. Poor guy, he's a saint.
I love, like, I want to sit and talk forever. Like, I love these interviews. They're so fun. It's such a fun place to be. So if the ladies want to find you, where do they go to find you or work with you? And obviously I'll have links below, but I want you to share, you know, your heart with them as well.
Yeah. So social media, there's obviously 100 platforms out there, but Facebook is really where I live. That is, we haven't put a lot of effort into the other platforms because we have such a strong audience on Facebook, and that's where I live. So I totally appreciate that. How many people show up to have conversations and the relationships that we built online. So facebook.com/Angela J. Herrington. That's where you find me. Also the Christian Women Who Lead group, which I mentioned a little bit earlier. You can find that if you go to the Angela J. Herrington Facebook page, or you can also go to my website, angelajherrington.com. And there's a little button at the top that says free group, and that will help you get into that group. It's one of my favorite places to hang out. We have almost 4,000 women in there, and there's some fires going on in there. They're good fires. You know, sometimes God lets you be a part of something, and then it starts to take on a life of its own, and you just kind of sit back and you're like, I didn't create that. like I don't know. I don't know why we got such a big portion of the Holy Spirit in that group, but I love it because there's such amazing ladies, and they're from all over the world, everywhere except for Antarctica. We figured that out the other day.
Wow.
So if there's anyone on this podcast or on this summit that knows a Christian woman in Antarctica that has access to Facebook, hook a sister up, because that would be pretty epic.
That is awesome. I can imagine how fun it was trying to figure that out too.
Yeah, we do a post every once in a while, like, where's everybody from? And I remember when the group first started and there was like 20 people in there. It was cool. But now there's like 4,000, and it's just, it's really crazy to go through. And so the last time I noticed a couple of places that we'd never had anyone from before. And so actually my kids were in here and I was like, oh, let's look at this. And so we went through and we're like, oh, there's that. Yep, got that one. Sweet.
How fun. So yeah, see, you're doing your mission work all over the world, right on your Facebook page.
Absolutely.
Powerful platform. I tell people that all the time. That's the most powerful platform there is.
It really is. And we've coined the term digital outreach ministry, because it's not going to replace a brick and mortar church. Having a local church in your community is essential. But if we're really honest, there are some people who aren't going to get there without a midpoint. And so if I can put God's word on this and have 1,000 people share it every day, then there's a potential reach of hundreds of thousands of people who are scrolling at their worst moment, right? Sitting in bed at the end of the day, not being able to sleep. It's 2 a.m. The bar is just closed. I'm waiting on an Uber to come pick me up because I'm too drunk to drive. What are you doing? You're scrolling on your phone. Like, wherever you're at, when you're lonely, people scroll on their phone. So it just, that's, I think, one of the things that we're missing out on as Christians, is being able to be on here in a positive, grace-filled way that makes people say, oh, what is this Jesus thing? Mm-hmm. Just curiosity. You're not responsible for their entire life. Just spill out a little bit of curiosity. If we can foster curiosity about Jesus, Holy Spirit's going to take care of the rest. Like, there are places that they're going to get plugged in, but they have to be curious before they'll walk into those places. And that's really where this comes into play.
Yes. Yay. And I know you have an awesome gift for the ladies.
Yeah.
So tell them about that as well.
Yeah. So I kind of have a two-part gift. The first thing is, I always get asked, how do you know whether to take action or to sit still? Because sometimes we want to sit still when it's a take action moment. And sometimes we want to take action when God's like, no, chill, just chill. Right. So I asked a bunch of my wisest friends, bloggers, pastors, a whole big diverse group of people, and I compiled all their answers. And what I did was I created a report that's called 22 Ways to Know When God is Calling You to Take Bold Action. And so if you go to angelajherrington.com, there is a link where you can request a free copy of that. And then on the thank you page, where the ebook is also a link to the Christian Women Who Lead group. So you can get both of those things and come over to the group and share with us what's going on, and just kind of discuss some of those different things that are in the report. It was really cool to do that project and just hear the diversity. I mean, if I could have said, okay, I got to go out and find people to say these things, that's exactly what I would have had them say. So it was really cool how God brought all that to the table, and men and women and, public speakers and stay-at-home mamas, and there's just some cool diversity there. So I think just about everybody can find somebody that they identify with in that report. And then, of course, in the group, there's probably, if you feel alone in your calling, there is probably somebody in that group who is doing something similar and would love to talk to you.
What a powerful group to be able to bring that together, because it can be lonely.
Absolutely.
It can be. And so to have that, and then also, as well, to be a Christian and a business owner, it just bringing those people in the community together is just powerful in itself. So your work that you're doing is beautiful.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
Changing, and just all of it. I mean, I commend you for that, because that's a lot. Just to manage a Facebook group alone is a lot sometimes. So it
is, and I'm so blessed. I have an amazing team. we have about 10 staff and volunteer. We have a handful of volunteers, and my husband is my like manager. I don't know, wrangler is probably a better word. He takes care of the social media. He takes care of a lot of that stuff so that I can really show up and coach. And I have a couple other coaches in the group. Amanda is one of my co-coaches in all my groups, and she's just phenomenal. And it's so cool to have the layers of leadership. And just to see that grow, because I know I'm not always going to have the answer for people. I'm not always going to have the experience that lines up with what you need. So the more women that I can bring into this leadership team, it's just the better we're going to be able to serve. So yes, it keeps me sane, which is very important and very challenging at times. But more importantly, it allows us to serve our audience better and to really develop deeper relationships than we would be able to if it was just me, 16 hours a day scrolling on here trying to answer comments.
Yeah, you'd be a little tired.
I would. I'd be a lot tired.
Oh, it's been so amazing. And is there anything, I'm wrapping it up. Is there anything else that you feel like you want to share with the ladies before we go?
I think, the very core of my ministry when I first started, the message that God really gave me was that you're never too broken. You're never too broken. You're never too broken to be loved by God is kind of what we started with. And then as I matured and let go of some of the guilt and the baggage and the mistakes and all that stuff we talked about earlier, I realized that not only are you never too broken to be loved by him, but also to be like leveraged by him and to be used by him. And so if you're kind of sitting there right now watching this and thinking, yeah, I could, but I have this thing, whatever the skeleton in the closet is, or I would, but I just don't know that I'd hate to mess it up. I don't know that I'm smart enough. I don't know that I know enough. I would just really encourage you not to let those doubts get in the way. Like, let God drag you along for a little while. I don't know if it's a great metaphor or not, but we're running with it. Let him drag you along a little bit and surround yourself with people who they see who you are now, but they're cheering on the person that they see God shaping you into, because they're going to be amazing, amazing voices that keep you going when those, when you're running parallel to your doubts and your good stuff and the doubts are getting really loud. They're going to be the ones that say, wait, who's talking here?
Yeah.
Is that really what God says about you? Because I don't think so. Like and it'll give you whiplash because it'll pull you back to your calling so fast. You're like, how did I get way out there? So I think that's kind of the parting shot is that I would leave you guys with, is that no matter what junk, what baggage, what doubts, what mistakes, whatever, God still loves you and would love to use you to connect with other people and to encourage other people. And there's nothing in your past that's going to mess that up. Nothing in your present that's going to mess that up either. So I would say just go back to that very first step and just find a space, sit with God and say, all right, boss, I'm here. What are we doing?
Mold me.
Yeah. Just show up and just show up. That's it. Don't even worry about the next step. Just show up.
Yeah.
Just say maybe. You don't even have to say yes. Just say maybe.
Yeah, definitely. And what a beautiful way to end it. I mean, good job. I just want to high five you because that's so beautiful.
Yeah.
Those words are so beautiful, and the women need to really soak that into their heart, that you are enough and you have what you need and you have what it takes, and God loves you no matter the circumstance, no matter the situation.
Right.
Just show up.
Absolutely.
So, well, it has been amazing, and I appreciate you, and I'm so grateful for the work that you are doing. So thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I look forward to seeing the other speakers' videos as they come out and connecting with some of the ladies. I know it's just going to be, I appreciate you putting this together because it's a lot of work, but it really is going to be phenomenal. And my heart says there's going to be a community that stems out of this that would not have normally, we wouldn't have found each other without this summit. So I appreciate you for that.
Oh, thank you. Well, ladies, we will see you on the other side, and I hope tonight has been fantastic. Have a great night. Bye.